From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. With a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs set to expire on July the 9th, President Trump's trade negotiations with key partners remain at an impasse. On July the 7th, he signed an order allowing the pause to lapse on August the 1st and sent formal notices to 14 countries, announcing that new tariff rates would take effect the same day. Tariffs have become both a bargaining chip and a blunt instrument in his push to revive U.S. manufacturing. But beyond the slogans, global supply chains are under strain, and American manufacturers are feeling the pressure. To break all this down, we have with us a distinguished group of panelists from Nashville. We have Tyson Jominy, Vice President of Data and Analytics at J.D. Power. And in our Beijing studio, we have Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of Asia Narratives Substack, and John Gong, Professor of Economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Apart from trade deals with the United Kingdom and Vietnam, U.S. negotiations with other countries have largely stalled. Now, recently, Trump has renewed pressure on trading partners, warning that reciprocal tariffs on other countries could go as high as 60% or even 70%. Where do you think this policy is heading?
I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on both the Trump administration as well as our trading partners here from the United States perspective. I think it's going to put that pressure on President Trump and his administration because they have set this deadline. And the pressure here is not to push it back, but to continue ahead with it and make sure they get as many deals wrapped up as they can. There still is a potential for some impacts as a result of this.
And I mean, some countries are obviously responding, like the United Kingdom and Vietnam, but other countries, let's put it bluntly, are lukewarm about Trump's tariff policies. How do you think the rest of the world may react?
Well, I think there's going to be a flurry of activity here in the next several days leading up to the deadline to get as many deals done as possible. The responses by country are going to vary depending on their exposure to the U.S., potentially as well as to how they feel about the relationship with the United States and the trade negotiations. Regardless, it's going to put a lot of pressure on both sides here to get deals done here as quickly as they can.
I mean, how are the United States manufacturing industries feeling the pinch?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on the U.S. auto industry and other manufacturing parts of the economy right now, as many are racing to bring their supply chains onshore to the U.S. and shifting as much production as they can. But that's not an easy thing to do, particularly in the auto industry. If you had a shovel-ready project today, it might be 3 years before you could get that project online and producing vehicles.
Einar, how do you think Trump's policy on trade is disrupting global supply chains?
Well, it's depressing any kind of investment. If you don't know what's going to happen, what are you going to do? Businessmen thrive in terms of predictability, and Donald Trump has embraced the madman strategy. He doesn't want people to know what he's going to do. He's already threatened that 20 countries on the 7th will be given higher tariffs. That's prior to the 9th date. So once again, sowing discord and confusion, hoping that this is a key to settlement, but actually most countries are holding back. They know that China and the U.S. are slow playing a deal that will come out in September, which could lead to further delaying this thing. But, you know, places like Japan, they've been really quite adamant, and also the EU, not interested in a quick deal.
Professor John Gong, how do you think this 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs will end?
Just one more country actually has reportedly reached agreement with Washington. That is China, actually, right? There was an agreement reached in London a few weeks ago. Reportedly, it has already been approved by both sides. It just hasn't been disclosed yet. I think a lot of countries are looking at the experience between China and the United States and take a page and see, you know, what can they learn from that. I mean, remember, before we reached this deal, there was really a tough period of time where both sides sort of, you know, posturing and play tough. There was a time that you know, tariff rates even shot up to over 100%. I think 2 or 3 weeks in April, where practically there's no trade going on between the United States and China. No ships are leaving Chinese ports during that period of time. But eventually they reach a deal. So I think you know, this kind of a behavior, sort of posturing and playing tough right before reaching agreement, is actually quite normal, as you probably know. Before negotiation before reaching an agreement. So I think you refer to Japan and the European Union. I actually talked to some diplomats from Japan here in China, and they actually view this experience between China and the United States very positively. They think that this is the way to deal with, to negotiate with the Trump administration. So I wouldn't be surprised that Japan and the European Union would more or less go through the same experience, where high periods of tariff rates will be announced before eventually they cool down and reach an agreement.
Okay, I have another take on this. I mean, I've talked to numerous trade negotiators over the last couple of weeks, and they've said, look, for a trade deal to happen, you need months. All right? It is not something where you say, oh yeah, we have an agreement. There's a framework in place. They're working through it, but the fact is there is no final settlement with China or with anybody else, not even with UK. UK was the first. They still don't have, they have a framework. So this is what Donald Trump, he's looking for kind of visual wins, this idea that somehow he's making things happen. But the fact is, no.
But do you think countries will fall along the ideological lines, the European Union, Japan, and Korea, having an easier time with the United States? We saw what happened with Trump 1.0 with then Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. And then, of course, China had a much tougher time since 2018. What do you think will happen?
No, it has nothing to do with ideology. It has to do with local politics. Let's take India, for example. I mean, you start looking at their trade positions. India says we have to protect agriculture. There's this long list. What is the U.S. position? Oh, all of those things have to go away. So you're really at loggerheads. Yeah, is there room for negotiation? But not when it comes to politics. When you're trying to protect farmers who vote for you, you cannot give away what they perceive as an economic benefit, especially when they're already struggling. So this has nothing to do with ideology, although, people say, well, I'd rather like to do a deal with the U.S. as opposed to any other country. But frankly, it's all local politics.
But the point is that I think what Trump has been doing is indeed to upend and in a way, I think even dismantle the WTO framework. And we have to see whether he's going to pay dues for WTO in the next few months, I think, right? It's going to be due.
Coming up.
It's coming up very soon, yeah.
I mean, the United States under Trump is, late on fees for UN Habitat. Last month we were there in Kenya.
Yeah, but WTO is different. He didn't pay last year. So, and this is the second year is coming up. Now, that means that the U.S. can't participate in any of the committee work. They can attend meetings, but they have no voice. But what this leads to is this possibility that not the WTO goes away, but the U.S. leaves the WTO, in which case the WTO could be reformed. So he could be doing indirectly a favor for the world.
Tyson, what do you think is the ultimate politics Donald Trump is playing here? What is his end game?
Well, if we take him at his word, his end game is to bring more production onshore to the United States and to bring supply chains over, particularly critical minerals, metals, and other items here to the United States. I mean, if we take him at his word, that's ultimately what he wants. Most countries protect their manufacturing industry. It's about jobs. It's about jobs in their home markets. So if we're to believe basically what we've heard is that this is about bringing, high-paying manufacturing jobs to the United States, and to, increase the defense capabilities of the United States in the future. Whether that actually happens remains to be seen. In the auto industry, we're starting to see a very minor shift in production to the U.S. Beginning of the year, we saw about 51% of vehicles produced in the United States sold here. Now we're up to about 56%. So we are seeing a minor impact already here out of the gate.
You talk about defense industry of the United States. How big a concern is it for Trump, to really beef up the defense industry, or potentially the defense industry, should there be a major conflict?
Yeah, I mean, certainly countries want to control their own destiny when it comes to defense of the country. So, if you can believe what the administration is saying, bringing on particularly the future of global combat may be far different than what we see today, whether it's drones or other technological inventions. Most countries want to be able to control their own destiny in that sense. But another big part of that, though, is the manufacturing base for any country to have a very strong presence in their manufacturing market within the country. So we're seeing that very much at the high end of the market, automobiles, technology, other pieces. Where we're not seeing it so much is, of course, at the low end of the market, which would be clothing and other textiles and cheaper goods that come in.
Professor John Gong, what do you think?
Well, I think putting up high tariffs is not a way of establishing a competitive domestic manufacturing industry. We've been talking about auto industry. I think the way it's going right now, eventually I think what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years is that you're going to have a American manufacturing industry in automobile of making all those sort of backward cars, I would say. These gas guzzlers, these F-150 Ford trucks, pickup trucks, whereas the rest of the world is moving on to more energy efficient, climate-friendly vehicles like electric cars and hybrid vehicles. I think in 5 years, it's quite possible that Americans go to Mexico and find out that the cars they're driving are 10 years behind of those cars in Mexico. This is not the vision that the good people, politicians in Washington are looking for. What's the point of building an industry that is going to be outdated in 10 years?
Well, I would take it one step further. I mean, Tyson, I agree with you. I was chair of my state's International Trade Council. But the fact is, the U.S. is choosing the wrong way. The predicament that the world is in today, or the U.S. is in today, is because they wanted a strong dollar. And this is 35 years ago. They said, a strong dollar lets us borrow cheaply, and it helps Wall Street. But it kills your manufacturing. Today, America has a choice. They can go into manufacturing, which is not high paying. It's increasingly automated. And the fact is, the margins are lower. And if the United States creates the kind of capacity that it says, there'll be overcapacity in the world. And the U.S. is going to have to compete. And if they don't have subsidies, they cannot, because the wage differentials alone would prohibit that. The other choice is the U.S. could double down in terms of technology, embrace the digital economy, but they're not doing that. Well, what's the digital economy? High margin business areas that go to America's strengths in terms of education, high tech, and unfortunately, Donald Trump is choosing the wrong path once again, as they did 35 years ago with a strong dollar.
Tyson, what do you think Trump's policy is doing to the renewable sector of the United States? I mean, he's not a big fan about fighting climate change, obviously.
I mean, it sounds like it's about to be gutted from the changes in the bill. So, as the rest of the world is moving more toward renewable energy, the United States looks to be taking a step back or a pause away from it, and that includes, electric vehicles as well. So it's not just about anything to do with wind or solar, but we're talking about really, in a lot of cases, the future technology of many industries.
Now, talking about reshoring, something Trump promised to do, tariffs and political pressure, of course, have pushed companies to reshore, some of them to reshore production to the United States. But if you look at labor, capital, and infrastructure, remain major hurdles. Wells Fargo, a major bank in the United States, estimates that it would take $2.9 trillion to reshore U.S. manufacturing jobs to 1979 levels. Yet nearly half of the 3.8 million new jobs needed by 2033 may go unfulfilled. How do you see the gap between ambition and reality?
It's a challenge. I mean, in the auto industry, if we wanted to onshore all the sales strictly to the United States, I doubt the U.S. has the capability of even hiring the people necessary to do that. The strategy has been for most of the transplant automakers is to set up in the U.S. South. So not only is it cheap labor, but they set up very rurally in the South as well, where there's just not a lot of population. So, there's a real doubt that even the manufacturers that want to produce as much as they can here could even staff up for it just in the auto industry alone. Let alone talking about all the other manufacturing jobs that have been lost over the past several decades.
I mean, if we do a reality check, companies like TSMC and Apple. And Foxconn, which promised Trump, jobs and investment. In fact, in 2017, they pledged $10 billion for LCD factory in Wisconsin, promising up to 13,000 jobs. But by 2021, the investment was slashed by 84%, right? And only around 1,400 jobs were created.
Yeah, I mean, we do see a lot of over-promising with investment and under-delivering from many industries and many sectors of the economy. And it's something I think we're going to see changing now. A lot of automakers won't set up facilities in the United States here because even if they had a shovel-ready project, it's 3 years out, and that's about the time the administration may change in the United States. So a lot of companies are balancing sort of that long-term view and the investment costs versus the short-term friction created by these tariffs. I would expect to see far more companies pare back a lot of their previously announced investments, particularly in the alternative and renewable space.
Now, Einar, what's interesting is since Trump began his second term in February, more than 60 multinational companies have pledged to increase investments in the United States, primarily in advanced manufacturing, such as electronics, semiconductor, automobile, steel, and pharmaceuticals. Why do you think these companies are choosing America or said they would?
Well, let's take a look at this. I mean, Terry Gu, I was chairman of the state of Wisconsin International Trade Council. Okay. Not at the time Terry did his deal, but I told him, I said, it's never going to come to fruition. Now, those 1,400 jobs, which I think is closer to 1,300, actually have nothing to do with Terry. He turned it into an industrial park, which was a far cry from what it is. They put billions of dollars of subsidies into this thing for very, very little. And this is going to be the pattern that goes forward. If you start looking at all of those deals, except for a couple, none of them are shovel-ready. None of them are putting anything into the ground or anything like that. It's all subject to market conditions in the future, sometime after 3 years. Well, as Tyson put it, the administration is probably going to change by then. So no one is betting the farm that this is all going to happen. They're simply just hedging, giving Donald Trump what he wants. He wants big numbers, big pronouncements. He hasn't followed up. He hasn't, excoriated Foxconn for not following through on its promises, and they figure that will be the same.
Professor Gong, do you think Donald Trump will be on autopilot when it comes to dealing with China? Because we've seen a pattern where high-tech export controls are still in place. Restrictions on what they call sensitive materials are still in place. Might Trump still be swayed by the military industrial complex rather than making his own choices when it comes to China?
Well, I think there's a structural problem here that United States and China engaged in a very long-term strategic competition, and this is always the background that's going to stay there. But on the other hand, I think Trump even is a little bit better than the Biden administration. I think he really values these dollar signs. He values opportunities associated with American companies exporting products to China. Remember, recently he relaxed the restriction on the semiconductor design software, for example, right? And I remember, years ago, there was in his first administration, there was a lot of talk about banning the engines for the C919, which is the indigenous Chinese version of the Boeing 737. And he actually allowed for the export of these engines to China. So I think, on one hand, America's policy is going to be remaining a restrictive, sort of controlling strategy with respect to China's access to American technologies. But on the other hand, I think he also very much takes into consideration these business opportunities. I mean, President Trump is a businessman. He's very transactional, and he is very big on exporting American goods to China.
Yes, he's also 6 times bankrupt and involved in a lot of other things. The decision on the Boeing engines was very simple. He was told how many jobs would be lost in America because of that, and he just went that way. In terms of taking off the exports on sensitive chip technology, that was because he needs rare earths. So yes, I agree it's transactional, but there's no policy here. It is ad hoc decisions made day by day based on his sense of things. He flies by his gut, not by policy.
Talking about rare earth export control, China threatened it would do to the United States. I think that is part of the negotiating strategy of China in the run-up to the Geneva and London talks. What cards do you think China still have to play when it comes to dealing with Trump?
Oh, they have a tremendous number. And the fact is, China is 35% of the world's production. Trump thinks that he is getting wins when he says to Vietnam, 20% anything you produce, 40% on anything that goes from China. But the fact is, it's impossible. If you start looking at the increase in trade between the U.S. and Vietnam and the increase in trade between Vietnam and China, you'll get an accurate picture that most of these are flow-through goods, even things that are, quote, put together in Vietnam. The inputs come from China. So, China's not going to stand still and allow the U.S. to, in essence, encircle it and have policies that make these countries, in essence, try to cut off China. So, yeah, I mean, China can start putting on tariffs. They have rare earths, but there are other issues out there in terms of manufacturing inputs that the U.S. China could also say, well, you don't like our industries, we don't like yours. Goodbye, Coca-Cola. Goodbye, McDonald's. Goodbye, all these entities. Others. Well, it's not only that, but if you go into any Chinese bathroom today, you're going to see a collection of shampoos, soaps, etc., that come from American companies. So this is not something where anybody wins. It's a question of who loses the least.
Tyson, what is the sentiment in the southern United States or middle America when it comes to Trump's policy vis-a-vis China?
Well, I mean, politically, the South, where I'm located, is very much a Trump-leaning part of the country on average. So most people that I talk to on the streets and socially seem to be rather optimistic about it. But, I think the reality is fulfilling these jobs promises and bringing manufacturing back to the United States is a very long-term action that I don't think most people I encounter socially truly appreciate how difficult of an endeavor that would be to fulfill those promises.
Professor John Gong, where do you think China-U.S. trade negotiations, the specifics, can be implemented or not in the days ahead?
Yeah, well, on this issue, I totally in agreement with Einar that what they have reached is a framework. There might be also other very detailed issues that be worked out, and we all know that the devil is in the details, I guess, right? So it's going to be a challenging problem how both sides can work on these details. Nevertheless, they do have a mechanism, though. They establish a sort of a joint committee to work on these things according to the agreement. As was disclosed. I think overall, China still wants to maintain a good relationship with the United States. And on this issue about, what previously Anna talked about the cards China has, I'm actually having a little bit of disagreement here. I think to take a retaliatory measure on companies like Coca-Cola and P&G, I think you're referring to, yes. Right? This is the last thing we want to do. I think overall, corporate America in China, operating in China, are in support of a better relationship between the United States and China. These are the last ones that we should be hitting on if there's an issue between the two countries. And the contrary, I think we should even provide a better environment to help these American companies to succeed in China, especially Tesla, I would say, right? I think we should extend the invitation to Mr. Elon Musk if as Steve Bannon was advocating actually deporting him, right? He's saying he's not American. I would say, okay, welcome to Beijing if you want.
Well, I agree with you in terms of it's not, as I said, no one wins. But when you ask me what kind of cards could be played, yes, this could be. I would agree that this is not ideal. But in terms of actual getting something done, it's probably going to come down to what I would call a phase 2. Remember phase 1, China agreed to buy soybeans and energy from the United States. It's very transactional. What it does is it ties Trump to the agreement. Anytime he violates the agreement, the buying stops. So he has to calculate that in to whatever he is planning to do. So I think phase 2 is where it's heading, but China is looking at a situation where this guy's going to be around for 3.5 years. This is not something where they're in a rush to do something, because the only thing they know for certain, as soon as one deal is concluded, Donald Trump will be back with a new one.
Yeah. Tyson, what do you think would be the right policy when it comes to trade that Trump can pursue, vis-a-vis China?
Yeah, I think when it comes to China, there should be a lot of very care taken to keep the relationship strong. So much of the U.S. Goods come from China already. And so I would say when it comes to trade with China, keeping the long-term perspective in mind would be most important, and keeping that relationship very solid. I mean, the countries do a lot of trade, and it does a lot of benefit for both countries, and nobody wants to jeopardize that. So I think we need to keep that moving ahead, and that really should be the guiding light.
I mean, I remember last time I was interviewing in southern United States, be it Texas or Tennessee. I mean, farmers, ranchers, industrial workers there, they have a stake in the U.S.-China trade relationship. I mean, the soybean farmers, they have a stake in exporting a lot of their produce to China. Have you been talking to them? I mean, what is the sentiment from them when it comes to China as an important trading partner?
Yeah, I'd say that whole sector, I mean, the agricultural sector, exports a lot to Asia in general and doesn't want that to stop anytime soon. So I think there's a lot of urgency and a lot of need to get a deal done that keeps agriculture moving, like it keeps goods coming from China to the United States as well. You know, both markets benefit from the trade and rely on each other very much for trading partners. So, you know, the farmers, they just want more markets. That's all they want. And tariffs are putting up obstructions to that. So they just want a deal. They want to get it done and remove the uncertainty, like manufacturing. They want the uncertainty out.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing and for your insights. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. I'll see you again next time.